should we have a look at the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, who's caused a stir, as we told you yesterday, actually. We compared calls to leave the ECHR to the rise of Nazi Germany in the 1930s.
He was speaking at the annual security lecture at the Royal United Services Institute, and he claimed that people who are calling for the UK to quit international agreements sort of echo similar demands that were made by legal experts in the 1930s in Germany. And we all know what happened next.
Well, Number 10 has told GBNews Sir Keir Starmer has full confidence in his Attorney General.
With us now to discuss this, Deputy Editor for Spiked, Fraser Myers. It was a very poor choice of words.
Yes, he said that it was a clumsy choice of words, but I don't buy that, because if you look at his speech, he makes the comparison several times, not only makes a comparison with the Nazis, but also with Putin. So I think he possibly has been told that you should regret your choice of words from the top. So what he did, actually, he didn't directly compare those who want to leave the ECHR to Hitler, but he compared them to the Nazi jurist Carl Schmitt. And in academic circles, if you want to compare someone to Hitler without directly comparing them to Hitler, you raise this name of Carl Schmitt, who is this jurist who basically said that actually what matters is raw power, state sovereign power, rather than international legal obligation.
So the inference is what we heard before, is that if you're worried about immigration, or if you're and you think that the way to do it is to leave the ECHR, then your thinking is somewhat very, very right-wing.
Yeah, I mean, the inference obviously falls down, because what people are complaining about is the over-application of essentially human rights laws in a way that creates complete absurdities around immigration. So it means, this is why when you hear all these ridiculous stories, every week there is a new story of a migrant who can't be deported, who's committed terrible crimes because of some bizarre interpretation of Britain's human rights obligations. Now, that is entirely different from a Nazi jurist saying it's fine to invade other countries, for instance. There's just no comparison between those two things. I think...
No, but the problem... I tell you what this does do, though, and this is the problem Keir Starmer can't get away from, is because there is that inference that people who then believe that are somehow, in some way, even if very weakly, thinking along the lines of Nazism, right? I mean, how damaging can that be? How out of touch with what a lot of the people in the UK are actually saying and feeling?
Well, precisely, and I think, there are calls to sack Lord Hermer coming from the opposition benches. I think for Keir Starmer's own good, he should make that move, not just because of this outburst. I think Lord Hermer has proved himself time and time again. We should not be talking about the Attorney General's name, first of all. If the Attorney General's in the news, something has gone very badly wrong. But it's not just this. He is the embodiment of the kind of sort of woke international lawyer type figure that actually is rubbing people up the wrong way on all kinds of issues. He is kind of responsible for giving the legal green light to the Chagos deal, which everyone recognises as a disaster. Might make legal sense, but makes zero political sense or common sense. There is also, he's been accused internally, lots of people are frustrated with him because he is blocking a lot of policies, suggesting that they might be, they might run into trouble in the courts. He doesn't want to have any whiff of the courts getting involved in or running judicial reviews of Labour policies. And that actually is proving a bit of a drag on Labour's projects and them implementing their manifesto projects. So there's frustration within, but the problem is he's Starmer's friend. He was appointed at the last minute. He was appointed after the election, one of the few people in the shadow cabinet. He replaced Emily Thornberry, a much better known person for the role of Attorney General. He's a good friend of Starmer, so it looks like he will stay.
As one of our viewers has pointed out, clumsy is not a good look for the highest legal representative in the land.
Well, quite. And also, he was speaking, again, at it was a prepared script. This is a lecture. This was not him speaking off the cuff at a drinks event. He wasn't caught on a hot mic. These were probably words also... Normally, when a minister gives a speech, it has to be cleared by Number 10 Downing Street. So did Number 10 not realise that these words were clumsy until they were picked up by the papers? It seems just very, very... This doesn't reflect well on anyone.
But what is going on at the moment? Because what a week it's been. Because, I mean, all this hoo-ha, which probably isn't going to end well for Lord Hermer, But just a couple of days after Keir Starmer decided he had to do an emergency press conference to tackle the threat of reform.
Well, precisely. He's doing this press conference to say, we're the party that's going to deliver on your priorities. It comes a week after he gave his speech on migration that said, we're going to take illegal migration seriously, we're going to take mass migration seriously, we're going to bring the numbers down. Don't listen to Farage, trust us, we can get the job done. And then to basically insinuate that those voters who are wavering, those voters who are either switching from Labour to Reform are somehow tainted by, Nazi-like views, because obviously leaving the ECHR is a key reform pledge. It's just a disaster for them. It's just they obviously they want to play the electoral game. They need to win back those voters, but really they look down their noses at those voters. And I think Hermer's revealed that. Well, that's the $1 million question, because you think they do seem to have one good advisor in number 10, Morgan McSweeney, who seems to have some level of, he seems to be somewhat in touch with public sentiment, but it seems as if everyone else in the party is running off in a different direction constantly.
I mean, what this highlights is the fact, they've got a massive majority, they've got a super majority in the House of Commons, but we know turnout was low, we know, it was all the figures were very low in terms of the votes they got in the election. And it just goes, it's the House of Cards, isn't it? Because they're not reflecting on what the majority of people in this country actually think. So to come the next election, would be toast.
Exactly. I mean, we know that they won by default, really.
Yeah.
They won the last election because the Conservative Party lost 7 million votes.
Yeah, just like that.
And Keir Starmer, Labour hardly improved their position, actually, on the 2019 election, which was a historic loss. So there has always been, I think they have always understood that the majority was, a bit of a sandcastle majority. But it seems as if they are not prepared to... They could use their time in government to make some steps that would make them popular, that would bring people round, that would make people think, well, we'll give you another term. They seem to be completely at sea and incapable of doing that.
Actually, Gareth, another one of our viewers, points out, it wasn't clumsy, it was a smear on those of us who think that leaving the ECHR and other things would be a good move. So it's an insult to an awful lot of people.
I think that's exactly right, and I think that's an expression of his beliefs. So there is this, in those circles, there is this narrative, I think it's a slightly false narrative, that because the Convention on Human Rights came about after the Second World War, that therefore, and because it was endorsed by Winston Churchill, that therefore any deviation from that means you're going back towards the Third Reich. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, one of the historical aspects that's often ignored is that many people on the left actually opposed the creation of the European Convention on Human Rights. The Labour government, it was the Conservatives that brought us in, the Attlee Labour government were deeply opposed to it because they understood that it was a check on democracy, that it was a threat to democracy, and that it was brought about because elites feared mass democracy, believing it would take us to fascism or communism. Now, that left-wing critique has disappeared, and instead you have the opposite, where you have someone like Lord Hermer that says anyone who deviates from this institution, this actually what was once a conservative institution, is a fascist. It's completely bizarre, completely ahistorical, and an insult, as you say, to the many.
So will he go? Do you think?
He should go, but I think that I think Starmer is sufficiently clueless to keep him on.
OK. Well, we shall see. Fraser, thank you. See you a little bit later on. Well, a spokesman for the Attorney General told GB News he gave a speech defending international law which underpins our security, protects against threats from aggressive states like Russia and helps tackle organised immigration crime. He rejects the characterisation of his speech by the Conservatives. He acknowledges, though, that his choice of words was clumsy and regrets having used this reference.
Will that statement be enough to save him, I wonder?
We shall see.